Welcome back, everybody. Monday morning edition of Hot Mic Rough and Rolling here. Jeff Kolpak will join us about a half hour on this Overreaction Monday. Nobody better to overreact with than our next guest, who joins us each and every Monday at 9:35. Our guy Sam Herder from Hero Sports BetMGM to give us the lowdown on week number 5 of FCS football. Look ahead to week 6, where we are now fully into conference play, so we're starting to get maybe an early picture for postseason. I'm interested in your ballot. I know you and I are pretty similar on where we have for the top 5, and I want to get to the Grizz in a second on what they did to Idaho, but we're starting, I think, to shake things out on who. I think certainly we have 5 really good teams, maybe one really, really good team here in Fargo. Where do you stand on where we're at top 10-wise, and how many teams are good, really, really good?
Yeah, I think the top 5 right now is looking strong. I do think NDSU stands out a bit more. I think I don't, I don't necessarily want to say, a big gap just because, again, we don't know, but just yet. But I do think NDSU is maybe a small tier above everyone else. Uh, Even if their resume, like their resume might not look as good as South Dakota State or even, Montana, because both of those schools now have 2 ranked wins. NDSU has the one. We'll see if USD now falls out of the rankings or not, but there's still a certain level of weight you give to the eye test, and NDSU has handled opponents like they're supposed to handle them. So I do think NDSU to me is a clear number 1. But South Dakota State, I still think continues to look really good. I think the Grizz have looked really good as well ever since that fourth quarter against UND. It seems like that has kind of vaulted the Grizz into having a really good season so far. And we saw Montana State go toe to toe with South Dakota State, so I think that's telling as well. And then Tarleton State, I think, is hanging as well. I do think they could be a dangerous team in the playoffs, and if they keep on winning games, they could host through the quarterfinals. I don't know if they'll get a top 2 seed. That's a longer discussion, but I do think Tarleton State is kind of that team that's going to bubble up like UIW did a few years ago, or UAlbany did a couple of years ago.
The one thing Tarleton has that the rest of them don't, Sam, is an FBS win. So if we want to project down the road, and if they are able to do what they want to do in conference play, they can go to the committee and say, well, look, we got this, the rest of you guys don't.
Yeah, and they'll have to be cheering for Army as well,
Yes,
because right now Army is 1-3. So it's not the Army team of last year that had 9 wins, I think. And if they go on a run, that's going to age well for Tarleton State. But as we like to say, not all FBS wins are the same. And if your best win is over an Army team that is 3-9, like, is that more impressive than South Dakota State going to Montana State and getting a win, or NDSU going to South Dakota State and getting a win? Hypothetically, I personally don't think so. But the UAC, like we've talked about, is good this year. I do think they are the 3rd best conference, and so if they go through that conference play undefeated, I do think that would be very impressive for Tarleton.
Is Incarnate Word back from the dead? They had a big win. I mean, they blew out Abilene Christian. I was following that score Saturday night looking, holy cow. So is UIW back?
I think they're going to be. They might not be, the top 5 team that we're expecting, but I do think they are back as far as being a playoff team, and they've already kind of set themselves back quite a ways, and so they probably will have to go on the road in the quarterfinals if they make it that far. But since they've made that quarterback change, and you could say the same thing about Mercer as well. Mercer also made a quarterback change. They look like a whole new team now, and UIW is now going with EJ Colson, and he's looked sharp these last 3 games. 2 games ago, they almost went to Northern Arizona and got a win, and that's a ranked team and a tough place to get a win. And this last weekend, they handled Abilene Christian, who was hot. I mean, ACU handled Austin P pretty decisively, and Austin P has a rather decisive, FBS win. And so now we're getting to the point where we're comparing this score to that score and that score and this performance against that performance. But I do think UIW, that was a much needed win. It could potentially vault them into going on a nice run here through Southland play.
All right, I had enough emails to ask you about this. Is it time to start paying attention to Presbyterian? Now, they are a non-scholarship school. They play in the Pioneer League. They're unbeaten. They have a win over Mercer that happened earlier in the year. They've played, I think, 2 non-Division I's. How do we make of the Blue Hose, and should we be taking them seriously?
I think as far as being a ranked team, we should take them seriously.
Okay.
It took me a while to
Same
put
here.
them in my rankings. I have them in right now in my top 25, but last week and the previous weeks I didn't. They're 5-0. They have three FCS wins, two non-D1 wins, and they beat Furman and Mercer.
Yep.
And both of those teams are 3-1 now. So those wins have aged well. Like we talked about, Mercer since then has made a quarterback switch. They're going with a true freshman now, and I think if Mercer and Presbyterian were to play this week, I would pick Mercer to win, and so that maybe knocks Presbyterian back. But if they keep on winning, I think I don't know how high they're going to rise necessarily in the rankings, but just with those two SoCon wins, we'll see what they do through the Pioneer Football League, which could be a pretty decent race. But I think as far as being a ranked team, they deserve to have that sort of attention.
The one thing they have going for them, they do not play San Diego because there's too many teams that they don't have a whole round robin in the Pioneer League. So that's to me, San Diego seems like the clear-cut best team in the league. They don't play them in the regular season.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. And Presbyterian, they're getting good quarterback play as well. Colin Hurst, I believe, his name is. He's been playing really well. So I think that'll be a pretty exciting race
All
in
right,
the Pioneer.
there's the first time we ever met Presbyterian on a hot mic, so we can get everybody excited about that. Late Saturday night, I didn't make it to the end of the game. Montana was up when I lost consciousness there. But what do we make of the Grizz and what they did to Idaho Saturday night?
Yeah, I thought it was a really impressive performance by the Grizz, and it's one of those games where you have to, either rewatch it or watch it or check the box score because it was like an 11-point win, something like that. But Montana had a 20 or a near 20-point lead until the final minutes
Right.
of the fourth quarter, and the Grizz had a double-digit lead for most of that game, and you really felt like they were in command that whole way. Idaho. Their offense was just not good the first half, but then the second half they came alive a little bit, hit some explosive plays to at least not necessarily be within reach, but to prevent it from being a total blowout. It was a three-score game, and then Idaho would hit on an explosive play and then make it a two-score game and kind of just hang around a little bit. But you really felt like Montana was in total command of that game, and it's interesting with the Grizz because you go back to the preseason and you weren't really sure how to gauge them because they literally replaced their whole defense, like all new starters. Yet the word was the Grizz might be better on defense just because they're more athletic and they got guys that fit the system a little bit more. And I think so far we're seeing that play out. And then offensively, the question mark was quarterback play, as it has been with Montana for quite some time. And Ayat didn't play good against UND for 3 quarters, and then he led them to that comeback.
Right.
And since then, he's been phenomenal. Super comfortable, super confident. He's getting clean pockets for him to step up and rifle some nice throws in. And so I think that offense has taken the next step. And then Eli Gilman, I think it's just been fantastic. The Walter Payton Award will probably go to a quarterback, but if there's a running back that deserves it, I think Eli Gilman is going to be in that conversation.
Now, the one caveat I'd say with the Grizz, Sam, they have not left Missoula. They have not left the state of Montana for the start of the season. They're going to finally do that, which we'll get to in a second in our spotlight games coming up. But they haven't played a road game. UND was their toughest opponent, I would say. I think they're better than Idaho. That, I guess, is incomplete, at least for me. I know the schedule is what it is, but they haven't played a road game yet.
Yeah, they're gonna have, I believe it'd be 8 home games,
Yeah.
this year, which is just crazy. But I mean, it's good for them that they can schedule that because that's the luxury of having a football program that invests and gets fans and gets fan support because Montana doesn't have to play a Power Four opponent. They can just host whoever in the non-conference and get paid more. They get like $1.2 million per home game in ticket revenue, so they don't have to go to other people's places. They can pay people to come in because they'll have a great return on investment there. So their schedule sits well as far as who they get at home, including Montana State. I think their toughest road game, I believe they go to Sac State, but the Hornets just lost to Cal Poly, and so that might not be as difficult as we originally thought. So I do think scheduling is on their side. But with that said, I do think they do look like a good ball club. So you kind of have to factor that in as well, that they do look like a good ball club. Plus, they have the schedule that sits on their side, so it all sets up nicely for them.
I want your 2 cents on what you saw Saturday in Fargo. I think we already had some red flags on South Dakota coming into this. We talked about it last week on the show. Whatever we saw in Ames, the game with Lamar, how it finished with Northern Colorado, I think you got to trust your eyes, Sam, and I think that's what we saw Saturday when the Bison played.
Yeah, I think anytime you beat an opponent like that, it's impressive. Anytime you beat a Valley team like
Yep.
that, it's impressive. Even if it is like, a bottom dweller like Murray State, you still go, okay, like when you dominate like that, it's impressive. And yeah, South Dakota has really fallen off. I
Yeah.
think you can see that. And we'll see what they do from here. Maybe they rattle off some wins, maybe we don't. Watching that game, it was kind of a blend of, man, NDSU looks awesome, but also like USDS falling off
Yep.
so quickly. And I know there was some FCS discussion after they beat Northern Colorado that even though they won, they should have fallen out of the top 25 just because you put their resume and you put that resume on Youngstown State, and Youngstown State probably wouldn't have been ranked, but because it was South Dakota and they were semifinalists last year, they kind of stuck in the rankings. And after how they played against Drake, you thought, okay, maybe this is a bit of a launching point for them, and they're starting to click. And I don't think anyone thought they were going to go to Fargo and win, but at least keep it respectable and
Sure.
hang in there, establish the run a little bit, maybe make it tough, offensively for NDSU, but they just didn't belong on the same field. And I think NDSU just continues to roll, and Cole Payton has been fabulous, and Bryce Lance, I don't know how you defend him, and if you do, you got other wide receivers that can make plays, and the NDSU offensive line plays well defensively for the Bison. They're just flying around, and
Yeah.
there's some explosive plays every now and then that defenses will hit, which always happens in games, but it's just really hard to find a lot of success on that Bison defense.
Bison have been really good. Again, level of opponent is what it is, but that is now it's a conference game, and they did that. I think we got to start again trusting our eyes. The Bison look like they're pretty good.
Yeah, and the toughest opponents are still to come, and
Yep.
on the road this week to Illinois State, which is a top 10-ish team, and uh, Illinois State hasn't fared too well, but I think that potentially could be another good test for the Bison.
Let's get to our spotlight games, which is that right off the hop. The Bison are playing. It's a night game as well, so there's going to be some gamesmanship here for Illinois State, hoping for a big crowd. They have not beat the Bison since 2010, Sam. It's been a long time.
Yeah, and Illinois State has got some good preseason love, and they're pretty highly ranked for the Redbirds. But they haven't really beaten that top-notch opponent, whether
Nope.
it's NDSU or South Dakota State. So this is a good gauge for both teams. Montana State goes to Northern Arizona, another ranked matchup.
Yeah.
NAU is a tricky place to play, and the Cats had a competitive game there a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of years ago, I should say. South Dakota State goes to Youngstown State. I think another ranked matchup again. Youngstown State is kind of hanging in the 20s there, so this is a good test for South Dakota State, and we'll see what Youngstown can do. They've been competitive in some games as well. And the last one, West Georgia goes to Austin Peay. West Georgia just keeps on winning.
Yeah.
5-0 now, second year as part of Division One. They're not going to be playoff eligible until 2027 because of the long transition process. So another great test for West Georgia. And I think Austin Peay will continue to be ranked. So it's looking like 4 ranked matchups this week, but we'll see exactly what the rankings are
I'm telling you
later
right
this
now,
evening.
West Georgia could go into the playoffs and win a game. I've seen enough. I think I just that's the disappointing part of this is they could make the playoffs and maybe win a game or two, and they're not eligible.
Yeah, and they're a D2 team or a former D2 team that had success
Yeah.
at that level, and I think they're investing pretty well. They got great talent. They can recruit out of high school. They can also get some nice transfers, so that's a program to keep an eye on.
Let's go back to that Northern Arizona game. I'm interested. If Montana State's looked better since the loss to the Jacks, and they've handled the opponents that they've need to. I'm really interested in that game. You mentioned Flagstaff's not an easy place to play. We've seen other teams lose down there. I'm keeping my eye on that one on Saturday afternoon. Let's see how NAU plays against a team they haven't been able to get over the hump against.
Yeah, Northern Arizona has looked good. They're a very experienced squad from last year's playoff team. So this is a really good test for Montana State. And, they 2 games ago, they kind of had that ho hum 17-0 win over Mercyhurst. But
Yep.
this last weekend, I mean, they handled Eastern Washington. And that's the type of performance that, like, past Montana State squads would handle Eastern
Correct.
Washington like that, and they did it again. And the Cats on defense look great. I mean, I don't know if they have the best defense in the FCS, but it might be top 2, top 3, if not number 1. They look really, really good defensively. I do think they're better on that side of the ball than they were last year. And then offensively for the Cats, they're just different this year. They can still run the ball, but under their new offensive coordinator, they're throwing it much more. And Lamson isn't Tommy Mellott as far as his playmaking ability, but he's
been
a
good.
more pure passer, a better passer than Mellott. So it's just a different looking Montana State offense. And I think once that really starts to click with their different scheme, I do think they are definitely a contender again this year.
All right, we got a couple minutes left. I've tried to save enough runway for you to explain your story you've been working on, and great job reporting on this because everybody else was following you after you broke the story on the FCS playoffs, considering using a private equity firm to break away from the NCAA to run the FCS postseason. Can you boil it down to where we're at with this story?
Yeah, I first caught wind of this like 2 weeks ago, and I was kind of 55-45 as far as excited slash over concerned. But then I did more reporting on it last Monday, a day before the meeting, and I was probably 65% excited, 35% concerned. And now after, I mean, the full story is not out just yet because there's still a lot of small details to iron out. Because this is the first step in a long process of happening. But I'm probably 75% excited while still 25% concerned and unknown. But essentially, what the pitch is from this group called Sequence Equity is to take the FCS playoffs out of the NCAA model and run it as its own playoff, a private playoff. And a new entity would run this, and this entity would be owned by the FCS conferences. And so the FCS conferences would own the FCS playoffs, and then this private equity group would have minority stake and inject potentially tens of billions of dollars into it. And for those that wonder how this would work, it's the same thing as the college football playoff. The FBS postseason is owned by all FBS conferences. And the value in this is the FCS is really handcuffed right now under the NCAA umbrella because they can't negotiate their own TV rights. They can't get their own sponsorships. And so some people look at it as, well, private equity coming in, like that's kind of, like you don't necessarily want to go down that road. And I'm somewhat in that boat. But the pitch here is not only for that money to come in, but also it allows the FCS to get more sponsorships, to get a better TV deal, and in turn, you can make more money off of the FCS playoffs. This group views it as a really solid entity with great with great TV ratings, but is really under monetized as far as how it makes money. And so I think the benefits of this is one, money, right? You can now get a more financially incentivizing playoff bracket. If you don't have to bid on home games, if you don't have to get rid of that ticket revenue, all of a sudden, if you're Montana State and you host 3 playoff games, that's $3 million more in revenue that you get to keep. And so I think it could potentially make the FCS more stable as far as realignment and teams. Instead of wanting to make the jump to the FBS at whatever cost possible, now they can view the FCS playoffs as like we can actually make money, in the playoffs. And if we make it to the national title game, maybe there's some type of reward there, because I do think there could be a lot of money involved in this. It's a long way from actually happening. There's a lot of steps that need to be taken, a lot of conversations that need to be made. But I think right now there's enough intrigue and excitement to bring this to the NCAA to say, hey, this is what we learned. How would it work on your end to break off, from the NCAA as far as the postseason, and then kind of move the conversation along from there?
Where is the next step in this before I let you go? What has to happen now going forward?
Yeah, I think the conversation has to now go to the NCAA as far as like how, because the NCAA owns the FCS playoffs,
Right.
and it's a part of that big TV bundle. So now the conversation is, if we wanted to move forward with this, how would it work? Would we be able to unbundle? Like, would you allow us to do this without any repercussion? And from what I heard is, the NCAA might be more open to this idea than some people might think, to kind of hand this off to a third party and say, hey, if you guys want to run this and take it off our plates, like, have at it. And we've seen like men's soccer at the college level has kind of had some conversations about like how they might be run by like the professional league, something like that. And we see it with the NIT, we see it with the CFP. And so there is past precedent for this to happen. I'm sure if the NCAA handed this off and kind of broke that contract, there would be some type of guarantee as well for the NCAA. But it could potentially be a smoother handoff than what we thought. And, ESPN could just re-up, with its TV deal as well. And so that could be smooth as well. But there's a lot of conversations for this to take place. And if it did happen, like 2027 maybe, but most likely 2028 is when this would start. So we're a long ways to figure out all the finer details of this and if it would work or not.
Great reporting on this, bud. It's been interesting to follow, something we're going to keep our eyes peeled to as well. Great stuff as always. We'll see you next week, okay?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
There you go. Sam Herder joins us each and every Monday to give us the lowdown on what's going on across the country in FCS football. We'll break. We'll wrap up our first hour. Jeff Kolpak coming up in hour 2. Plus, a look back at the best high school games of the last weekend. Back on a busy Overreaction Monday on Hot Mic after this.